So here we go. So this would be a half an hour presentation. I'll start at the beginning because there may be some people here who know nothing about the site. So I'm going to try and cater for everyone. I'll try my best anyway. So here we go. So Chloe's already said thank you to everyone. So it's Wardle, Cumberland Council, the Cricket Club, and Tully House Museum for the fantastic exhibitions. I think there's still a week left, finishing on the 23rd. So let's go into what we're there, why we're doing this. Obviously, it's got an archaeological side to it that's incredibly important, but what I like to just shout out about and what this project has got a lot of attention over is purely the community side of it. It's a real grassroots project embedded in the community. So I think that's something really to be proud of, and something we tried really hard, and every season we try a bit harder to make it better. So it's the training, it's the community, it's the accessibility. So it's a lot more than just an archaeological project. So this is a very quick idea of where Carlisle is and where it sits in the Roman frontier. You can see Hadrian's Wall crossing. We're on the western side of it. And if you think of the two main administrative areas that would have been running the wall zone, you've got Corbridge on the east and you've got Carlisle on the west. We've also got Stanwix just above us there, which was the largest garrison and the only 1,000-strong cavalry station fort on the wall. That would have been the prefect there, would have been a very important guy. So Carlisle is a very significant place on the wall. Another thing that people don't realize is Carlisle was the most northern city in the Roman Empire. So that's something else to bear in mind when we carry on with this presentation. So now we've zoomed in a little bit to actually Carlisle itself. The two maps are showing you the same thing. One of them just showing you the image from Google Earth, and the other is just the map. It gives you an idea of our site, how it's almost equidistant between the two forts. Lugavallium in Carlisle, here, and Uxulladunum up here, Stanwix, also known as Petriana, and our site is there, just in the middle. We've got the Vallum, we've got Hadrian's Wall just to the north of us, and we've got the main river crossings across the River Eden, just here, which is probably also the Staingate. So for a location, it's a very significant patch of ground, very secure, and it's between two forts. So the double fort is quite unusual. So there's a lot of things about our site that make it a little bit different to the norm. So this is the plan from 2020, well, just before 2022. So there's a 20-meter scale. So the work we did in 2017 and 2019, we knew we had quite a big site. What we didn't know was how big it would actually grow. So here you can see it was at least 40 meters in size. These are walls we've confirmed. So we knew we had a large building with heated rooms, heavily robbed, but something quite substantial. We had some really well-preserved drains. There was a set coming out here, running to the west, and we had a southern drain heading towards our road. The road is Hadrianic, and if you notice, it's not so clear at this early days, but it's on a different alignment to this large building. There were hints of an earlier building, and also hints of occupation going on way into the 5th century and beyond. So even in 2022, we knew this was a very significant site. When I talk about a Hadrianic bathhouse, I've superimposed a bathhouse you'd expect to find on a normal fort, anyone on Hadrian's Wall. You could look at Ravenglass, Chester's, Bewcastle, pick any fort and you'd have a block plan bathhouse, this sort of style. They all follow the same plan, more or less, and they're all more or less the same size. So you can see it's a sizable building, but as we do more and more excavation, this building becomes dwarfed by the buildings we actually have on our site. So this gives you an idea in the scale. So this is at the end of 2022. This is the building we've got. Things to look at this building was it's built in an important period in the, well, a very important time in Roman Britain, really, the very beginning of the 3rd century. To go back to that period, you've got to think what was happening just before. The Roman Empire had been in civil war. The strongest general rebelling was Claudius Albinus, who was based in this province. So the province of Britannia was known as a troublesome province. So again, it leads to why Septimius Severus then decides to come over to Britain in person. It's basically pacifying a troublesome province. So he comes over to York, and this is the period this building is constructed. Let me just try and let some people in. Sorry about that. Admit all. So anyway, this was it in 2022. So we've got this Severan building. We know we've got a Hadrianic building, and we knew that this building was demolished, modified, partially rebuilt in the 4th century. And then we had evidence of some timber phase within the ruins of this building going into the 5th century, possibly beyond. We then had a lot of evidence of this site being quarried on an industrial scale in the 12th and 13th centuries. So the story of this site goes from the time of Hadrian right up until the medieval period, and actually beyond, because we've got evidence of the 2 sieges of Carlisle from this site. We have musket balls, cannonballs, coins from 1645, when the site was under siege, and also in 1745, when the city was also under siege. So it's an incredible story. Stop moving, Anna. Oh, here we go. So 2023 came along, and we opened up an area to the south of the site, and things that came across the drain, this big drain, curved. We now know why it curved. One of the highlights of this year was we found this little range coming off the southern wall of the bathhouse. Apologies, north moves. It's just to keep everyone on their toes. So north is basically where you'd normally think east is, sorry. So yeah, so we've got this drain, this Severan drain, beautifully constructed, and we've got this little range coming off it. Inside the range, we found a substantial stone foundation. So it looks like there was some sort of platform within that room to take something. So it could have been a shrine or something in it. And we've got a tantalizing little bit of a stub of a wall. So there may be a second matching range coming off. So this is something to consider in the future. So the southern side of the building at least is fixed. What you can also see from this is basically we have no other sides of this building fixed. The east side, the west side, and the north side, it's still continuing. So it's over 50 meters by 50 meters. So from 2023, we can now say this is the largest building on Hadrian's Wall. So I flipped it around again. So north is now where actually north should be. So this is the results of the whole 2023 season. I've outlined in blue, this was the area we opened up in May and June. The heads, I'll show you some images of later, were found on the road surface, just on the very edge of the road, you can see here. We now know that this road is likely to be an offshoot of the Stane Gate that was crossing a bridge just to the east of our site, across the River Eden. And one of the goals was just to fix it. I was hoping we could fix the southeastern corner of the building in this phase. but it's continued to grow. So the area was hoping to find a corner. We just found a wall heading off to the east. So we have no east side of the building. In the winter dig that we finished in November, we moved to the south of the road, an area we'd not really looked at before. We knew there was Hadrianic activity to the north of the road. There were shops, strip buildings, timber buildings, selling food and wine. So we have the pottery, we had the animal bone. So we know there was a lot of activity going on there that's then demolished when they build the Severn building. But we haven't really looked to the south of this road. So the main focus of November was to find out, is there much going on to the south of the road? And we found a massive activity to the south of the road, and we possibly got a corner of another large stone building. So this gives you a bird's eye view of our site during late May. So you can see the drains. These are coming from within the building. You can see the Severn drain snaking round. We now know why it snakes round. This is this little range we have with a large foundation, a platform in the center of it. Other things to note are the huge remains of the southern wall of the bathhouse. Bits of it survived really well. Some bits are being robbed down to basically nothing. It's just a ghost of a wall. Other areas, we have the rubble base core, and in some bits we found really nice ashlar masonry. So the site has been subject to really intensive quarrying. Some of the quarrying we now know is in the Roman period. There's a lot of Antonine material. There's a lot of Severn material. There's a lot of later 3rd century material and lots of 4th century. So it's getting more and more complicated. So this Severn building we talk about all the time, in its original form, we now think is only there for maybe 10, 20 years. So it's a very special building that goes out of, well, the purpose of why it's built seems to have finished. So they have to find a new use for this building. So it's very unusual. There's no plan. So we've always called it the bathhouse. It's now more like a villa or a large building with heated rooms than a conventional bathhouse. So this is where we are now. So the size of the building, these are the red hash lines are basically a combination of projected walls between bits of wall we've actually proven, and the bits of proven wall would either be standing wall or robber trench. And a robber trench is basically where there's formerly been a wall, but it's been robbed out, and you're just left with the negative trench where the wall stone would once have been. So a lot of our time on this site, we basically excavate, backfill from robbed out walls, but it still tells us a huge amount about this building. So things now are starting to come clear. The more we dig, the more the story grows, and we can start to come up with ideas of how this building would have once looked like. And what's clear now is we've got an aisled building. So this is the southern wall here. We've then got a parallel wall here of equal width, and then you've got these internal walls. So what we've got here is an aisled type building. So you've got corridors, and then you've got the main internal walls, and then it springs off to the north, following the same thing. It's also terraced on 3 levels. So it's terraced down to the river. So there was a lot of thought in how this building was positioned. The alignment is slightly changed. You can see the road here is on a different alignment to the building. So the road that had been there from the Hadrianic period, in the Severn period, it wasn't as important. They've changed the actual aspect. So it could have been for like the view, or we just don't know. So this building, it's everyone I talk to, there's nothing like it. It's a very odd building. And like I say, because it's an odd building, its life is quite short because it's serving a specific purpose, the purpose of which we just don't know. So now let's get to the road I've been talking about. This is the Hadrianic Road, beautifully constructed. It's got your textbook Roman agger. So it would drain on both sides. We've got a lovely roadside drain on the south side. And then cobbling. So we've got road and then basically pavements in front of timber buildings on the south, which would have opened up into shop fronts. Another thing to notice, we've got this very strange cobble structure built on top of the road. This is very late Roman, but weirdly enough, it has a short life because the road then goes back into use. It's partially sealed by gravel, and we've got some medieval coins actually on that road surface, the final. So we now know, this is from November, that this road was still in use in the 13th century. So it's just adding another little piece to the puzzle. Then we get into the Severn phase. This is what everyone gets excited about. You can see from the image on the left there, where the walls survive, they're enormous. That's a meter scale. So it's about 1.20 meters, 1.30 meters wide, and the foundations are at least 1.40 meters deep. So this was a wall to take at least 2 stories. We now know from some of the finds that were there, it had a domed concrete roof using vaulting tubes. So the wall had to be substantial to take the weight of the dome. And to the right, you can see what I was saying about variations in preservation. You've got here, where I'm indicating with the mouse, the rubble core that's beneath the ashlar stone. And then there's another wall running parallel where they've even robbed out the rubble core. So the level of robbing is really intense. This image also shows the terracing. This white streak here is a mortar floor, and then you've got a big square cut feature that we think was for a tank. So this is one of the terraces that the Severn building utilized. Here again, you can see a section of the Severn wall from 2023, equally massive. Roman mortar, real nice limestone. And then the one to the right, we've got what we call a ghost of a wall. The wall's gone, there's no stone surviving at all, but you can just see from the change in color, this is backfill, which has been chucked back in when they've robbed out all the stone. So when we're looking for this, it's sometimes all we'll find is a variation in the color in the soil to tell us where the walls have been. Probably 5% of the building survives as stone wall. The rest of it survives as robbed out robber trench. Then the thing that make this building special again are the vaulting tubes. You can see here, these vaulting tubes come from North Africa originally, and they're used to make lightweight, quick domes. So each one interlocks into the other, and you need a very light bit of timber scaffolding to support it. You then cover it in a thin layer of mortar, and then you set another layer of these vaulting tubes on top, and it creates a very strong dome. But also, with the hollowness of them, you have an air gap, so it's very thermally efficient. So it would have kept the heat in, especially in places like North Africa. It keeps the warmth in and the cold in. So basically, it's a perfect way to build a roof for something like a bathhouse where you want to, control the temperature. The other things from our site that are very special are the imp stamp tiles. You can see here, we've got 4 of them. We're now up to, I think, 38 imp tiles. It's the largest concentration of them anywhere in the Roman Empire. There's another 32, I think, from Annetwell Street, which dates the period where the fort in Carlisle was rebuilt from timber to stone. So it's tying our building with the rebuilding in Carlisle. Something important's going on. The weird thing there is they have imp roof tiles. We have imp hypercourse tiles. We have no imp roof tiles because our building's got a domed roof that would have been concrete. So again, this is just that view of the site when we were sort of finishing in 2023. So then we look back now and what's going on? Why is this building built? You now start to put the bigger picture in Carlisle. What else happens in the early 3rd century? Well, Carlisle gets its civic status. It becomes the civitas capital. That happens in the early 3rd century. This building's built. We also know the fort's rebuilt in stone. We also know a forum is built close to the cathedral, and another bathhouse is built under the market hall in Carlisle. The suburbs of Botchergate in Carlisle are rejigged. They demolish some, it gets remodeled. So the whole city of Carlisle is massively remodeled. Something important's going on. All this corresponds to that period where Septimius Severus and his family are in York. So we're looking at, 208, 209, 210. So there's a lot going on, and I think everything's interlinked. This is a nice image, a close-up of this little range I was talking to you about, and you can just see the cobble foundation in the center that would have housed, we don't know, a shrine or a base for something within that room. Again, this is from 2023, the scale of these walls from the Severn building. And then we talk about the drains. The Severn drains are beautifully constructed, and they've also given us a very fine assemblage of material. Or let me just let somebody in. There. So this is a typical view of the drain. So it's in quite a large trench that we excavate. We then have the flags in situ. It's never been robbed. They're quite often cracked like this. And beneath it, we find beautifully preserved drain, flagged base, beautifully stone walls on both sides. And the thing that's really got the attention with this site is the material we found from the Severn drain. As the story grows, we're now starting to have a dab at images. So this is just a rough image of one aspect of the building. So it gives you a gist. We got the road, the Hadrianic Road, and we've got the two little ranges coming off it, and we've got the domed roof with the aisle to the south of it. It's been cut off just because we don't know what's going on to the east and west sides. So anyway, this building, like I said, it has a very short life. There's a lot going on in the 3rd century. Walls are knocked down, smaller walls are built to replace it, but it still carries on in some form. In the 4th century, there's a wholesale rebuild. Bits of it are still used. You can see the hypercaust system here. This is the underfloor heating. And this is the original Severn concrete floor. You can tell they're still using it, but they're not maintaining it. So the status has basically dropped a few notches. So we've got one hypercaust here. And then you can see way up here, there's another hypercaust stack just sitting on soot. So basically they're still maintaining the heating system, but to a very poor standard. And here is a 4th century bit of wall that's actually chopped through one of the Severn walls. It's curving, and it's still heating because you've got a flue coming through the wall there. It's a cruder style, but parts of this building were still in use in the 4th century, and they were still heating the rooms. So here, again, we have a 4th century drain, and I've just put it side to side to one of the Severn drains. So you can see in scale and just in quality, it's dropped down a few notches. It's still nicely constructed. We don't get much from the fill of this drain. It's far narrower. The Severn drain, a child could easily crawl through it to clean the drain. This one, you couldn't. Other things we found in 2023 related to this 4th century phase is this small furnace area that's actually overlying one of the Severn walls. So the building's still of a status, but the status has dropped considerably, but it's still important enough to have heated rooms in it. Another thing in the 4th century that changes are the finds. It's all military. The earlier phase, it's a right mixture of stuff, but there's a lot of things that aren't military. We don't get weapons, military fittings. Here we have little buckles. Here's a spear, the Alla Petriana seal from Stanwix Fort. Tons and tons of coins as well in this 4th century say. So something's totally, there's a change in function. The coin profile just goes crazy. We got, I think, 570 coins from the site. Again, very unusual. It's the highest amount of coins from a single site in Carlisle. A mass of 4th century, very tightly dated to around 330 to 335, 336. And as you can see from some of the coins here I've just placed, they're in very good condition with very little wear. So the coins are coming to this site probably to be distributed out of the site. So it's probably serving an administrative function. Then stuff still carries on in the 4th century. This has been the hardest stuff to pin down. This is a view of one of our, what I call islands of preservation. So this area of rubble, when we first excavate, we just thought this is just rubble. This is, demolition. But now we've looked at it carefully. It's not. It's basically the infilling of the hypercore system that was probably collapsing. So they made a crude floor surface within the Roman building. And on it, we found a few bits of very late Roman pottery and one beautiful 5th century bronze hairpin. Other areas, and here's the hairpin with a stylized hand on the top. We have the dark earth, and we have these occasional stone dumps. Sometimes we have stone pad stones, which it's just a stone that's been laid flat. It's not random, but you can only really make sense of this when you see them on a bigger scale, where you can start to see patterns. So what these pads are for timber buildings. And some of these timber buildings could have been quite grand. So to think of timber as just being, glorified sheds, these could still have been substantial timber halls on this site. So it could still have been of a high status in the 5th century, but obviously not building in stone and not using the heating systems anymore or the drains. And this is from November, hot off the press, but now to the south of the road, we found a really nice group of pad stones for another timber phase. So this occupation that is very late 4th, 5th century continues now to the south of the road. And here again, you can see the pad stones. And here we've got a beautiful quern stone that's been laid down and reused as a hearth for a fire within the building. And to me, it was really, I love the fact we found this silver penny, I think of Henry III, just resting on that final cobble surface. So that was November time. So dating has been really hard for this dark earth, and when do things go out of use? So we've now got this brilliant bit of dating from the very final cobble surface on the road. So it's saying basically the road's going out of use in the 13th century. And then what's happening in that period? Quarrying. I've said the place was heavily pitted and robbed. It's on an industrial scale. So we have some small, beautifully, for an archaeologist, this is just a lovely section to draw. One of my favorite things on the site, but mostly they're far bigger. Some of the pits are 3-5 meters wide. And then some of them, they're more linear, they're following the walls. So they basically just wholesale rob the stone. And you then think, where's the stone going? Why are they robbing it? Well, in this period, Carlisle has been defended from the Scots. They need to build the city walls and repair the city walls. There's also the stone bridge over the River Eden. So there was a lot of need for building stone. So this may be in a very attractive place to rob in this time of need for Carlisle. Now it brings us on to the finds. Like I said, this Severn finds have been quite different to 4th century finds. We have Severn coins. We have lots of things of personal adornment from the Severn phase. Hairpins, rings, bits of jewellery, intaglio. So it's quite different and quite civilian in feel to the 4th century stuff. Latest work on the coin profile from 2022 to 2023. Basically, the coins, we're pushing it back more, so there's more early stuff going on. And I think this is, if a coin was minted in 97 AD, it doesn't mean it was lost in 97 AD. Some of these coins could have been in circulation for up to 100 years. But it's just telling us that there's a lot going on there, basically, in the Antonine period. 3rd century we knew about. And the drop-off is still very telling. Basically, when I said about this 330 to 336, this is this huge spike here. And basically, we're not getting anything beyond 330 in any quantity. So if we were looking in Carlisle, we would still have lots of coins from 340, 350, 360, 370. We've got none of that here, which is telling us something. The pottery hasn't been massively exciting. We've got a few very interesting. We've got 2 candlesticks that are very unusual. And we've now starting to get some very late 4th century pottery, which is, again, interesting. But other than that, the pottery is basically similar to the pottery we'd expect to find anywhere. So there's nothing massively significant from the pottery, which is unusual because all the other fine categories, we have got unusual stuff. So the pottery assemblage is currently lagging behind. Then I'd have to talk about the drain and the finds. That's what's got a lot of international interest. We have the intaglios, gaming counters, hairpins, glass beads. Not uncommon stuff from a bathhouse drain. If we want to look at similar ones, you could look at York and maybe Carlisle. It's the quantity of stuff that's interesting and the close date range. The intaglio are no later than the early 3rd century, so they fit in really well with the heyday of the Severn building, and the hairpins fit in with the fashions of the day. The rings themselves are missing. We just have the settings. I think we have 2 rings, one with an intaglio and 2 without. But you can see the beautiful quality of these gems. They fell out the rings in the steam rooms because the glue was vegetable based, and during the time you're in the bathhouse, they just sort of drop out the setting, and then they get recirculated through the drains, through the latrines, and they end up in the drains that are obviously slightly blocked, or we wouldn't be finding them. So we now have 70 intaglio from the site from a single context, so which is the largest assemblage from the UK from a single context. The other things are the glass beads, which are absolutely beautiful, minuscule little things. And they would have been necklaces, bangles, but also they would have been wired into the hair. So again, it's showing there's a lot of women in this building. there's also children present, because we also have a toy off a leg off a doll, for instance, a bone leg, and we also have child-sized rings for intaglios. So the demographic is quite different to what you'd expect within a fort. This is a selection of the hairpins. You can see here, this is what we originally had as a strange hairpin. It's basically upside down. It's actually a leg of a doll. And these little needles, we thought, are people sewing in the bathhouse? But no, we think they're in the hair, and you would have silver or even gold wire threaded between them with beads to create a hairstyle. Other things of note are the inscriptions. So the Alla Petriana that I've barely mentioned was one of the key regiments of Roman, most powerful one in the Roman province, 1,000-strong cavalry. The prefect that was in charge of this garrison would have been probably the third most important person in Roman Britain. But we have very few inscriptions to the Alla Petriana and very few lead seals. We now have 2 lead seals, so there's now 3 in existence. And we've got the first inscription to the Alla Petriana from Stanix. And here you can just about make out Petriana. And then this symbol here represents 1,000. So it's 1,000-strong cavalry. And this stone was just discarded in one of the discard heaps of medieval stone robbing. And then this season, we also had some highlights in sculpture. This is a dolphin head, just found again in the backfill discarded bit of stone in the robbed out wall. It came very close to that little range that had a shrine possibly in it. So maybe there was a fountain. I've seen similar versions of this, obviously in marble in Rome, posher, but as a balustrade on an elaborate stone staircase. So this is a very high status Roman sculpture in the province of Britannia. And then we have our 2 heads, totally unique, the scale of them. There's been a lot of debate over what they represent. We now seem to be happy with the hypothesis that they're the theatre masks with quite exaggerated expressions, as you'd expect in, the Greek and Roman theatre masks. Where they were, well, from the size of them and the way they've been carved, we think they would have been high up on a pedestal or a niche on one of the gables of the building. Another interesting point is they seem to have been quite rushed. One of them reuses an altar. So you'd think a building of this status, they would have had time to, commission a block of limestone or sandstone. No, they reused an altar. It's a bit rushed. So we think this building was built to a very tight time scale and had to be finished quickly. Again, why and for who? We're still thinking about this, but the imperial tiles, what's going on in Carlisle, granted city status. The whole Roman court was based in York. So it's one of our working hypotheses that this was an imperial construction. That's why it's built. And that's why its use rapidly disappears. It's built for a special event. So that's where we are. And I have to say thank you to everyone that's helped, who keeps on coming back, and who we're looking forward to seeing next year, because we now know we've got funding for 2024. So it's a really exciting time now where we can actually look forward. So to next year. So what are we going to do next year? Plenty of options, plenty of places we can't go. On our eastern side, we're pretty much stymied by the tree line, so we can go no further east. We have the southern side, which is great. The northern side, again, we have trees, and to the west we have a road. So we've got a few areas that could still be very interesting to look at to try and pin down the size of the building. It would be lovely to see what's going on to the south of the road. It would be great to prove, have we got a second range coming off the south wall? Could we have a corner to the building in that northwestern side? And I've put one potential trench on the eastern side where we can just about fit it in, just to see, could we just scrape in that corner on the eastern side? So there's a lot of thought, and obviously we can't do all of those 5 areas, so we'll probably be looking at 2 of them. We're hoping to be on site for between 5 and 6 weeks, and we'll be there May and June next year. The story will go on. Thank you for listening.
I just want to say thanks, Frank, for giving us that talk. It's really lovely to hear you speaking about the site and sharing that knowledge with us. We really appreciate it.